Today's episode is being brought to you by Gem City Fine Foods. They are a completely gluten-free and nut-free baking facility, and their desserts are incredible. I challenge you to tell the difference between some other big box brand and the desserts that these guys make. Even though they're gluten-free and even though they're nut-free and in some cases dairy-free, they are not flavor-free. Moist, delicious desserts delivered to your door. Find them at gemcityfinefoods.com. Why do we cook? We cook for food, for family, and for friends. We cook to bring people together.
Honey, that looks good. Pardon my fork.
Hello and welcome to Pardon My Fork. This is Andy.
And this is Cory Ann.
Joining me for another round by popular demand, by the way. You guys really seem to enjoy her nerding out over stuff last week.
I had a good time.
I wasn't sure how that would go over, but you know what? We've got a pretty smart bunch of listeners.
Hey, don't underestimate the fans.
Too true.
Only smart people follow our show. Just putting that out there.
I like it. That's a good demographic to have, smart people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if all of our listeners are smart because I'm one of the listeners, so...
Well, I don't marry stupid people, so it's just a personal rule.
There is that. All right, so enough of the lovey-dovey stuff, you guys.
Sorry.
Today, we have a theme, and that theme is Ballin on a budget. Actually, we decided today that we were going to do that because what we were cooking up for dinner was a very budget-minded meal.
One of my favorites.
Yes, one of my favorites as well. I cooked up some pork chops on the grill, and I had gotten the pork chops on a deal. They were $1.99 a pound from Safeway, and they're 3/4 inch cut, and so these beautiful slabs of pork were, gosh, I think it broke down to 70 cents a piece because of these big packs, you know.
Buying in bulk is always a budget-friendly way.
And buying when the meat is on sale.
Yes.
These were all marked way down, you know, for club members. It was normally $4.99 or $3.99 a pound. And so getting them for $1.99 a pound, not a bad deal.
And a tip, if you can grab your local butcher or whoever's in charge of your meat department in your grocery store, ask them when their next sales are coming up or if they have anything that's going to be on special that you can put into your food budget or your menu planning to help keep your costs down for your family. If you're saving for a really big trip and you want to keep your food budget down, which is a huge expense in a family with 2 kids or more, then talk to them. Also, they might have a large cut of meat on sale that they will cut down and package for you.
Oh, that's also true. We've done that before. We've bought boneless pork shoulders that we then had cut into strips.
And we've had large cuts of meat ground by them too. So instead of spending the extra money to buy a premium meat that's been ground, like premium chuck, then you can take a lesser cut of meat in a larger volume and your butcher will happily grind it for you at no charge. Yes,
that's also a really good point if you're doing burgers or something like that. The other thing that you can't get from your butcher, but you should be able to get at any grocery store is, of course, cabbage. And what's a head of cabbage cost? It's like $1.50. $1.50, something like that. And something that we recently discovered is taking the cabbage, cutting it in half, and throwing it on the grill, getting that smoke and char on the cabbage. And then, this is not exactly budget-minded, but I did chop up the cabbage and fry it in goat butter. That's probably the most expensive component in this whole thing.
It probably was, but a little goes a long way.
That's true. A little bit goes a long way, and I mixed it with some bacon fat.
Ballin on a budget or, gourmet on a budget, however you want to approach it, it's about taking low-cost items, adding a few layers of flavor without adding layers of cost, and maybe one splurge item, or taking a splurge item and spreading it out over multiple meals. So goat butter, it's a favorite here. It adds a really unique flavor to anything you put it on. And after you've added that layer of smoke and char onto the head of cabbage, then you come back and cook it in bacon fat or an infused oil, or in our case, goat butter. Then you get an amazing flavor. Now, my other tip, always with greens, is to add nutmeg.
I've been doing that with everything. The kale that I cook us in the mornings, the cabbage that I did today, just a small sprinkling of nutmeg. It adds this extra little depth of flavor.
It gives a little bit of a warm spice to it, and it complements hearty greens really, really well. Hearty greens are going to have that herbaceous, earthy, sulfur flavors to it. And that's a really important nutritional component in kale and cabbage and broccoli is that sulfur, and nutmeg really helps to complement that flavor really well.
Yeah, it does. And I'll tell you, adding a little smoke and char to whatever it is that you're eating, that is that extra depth of flavor that, listen, it's not free, of course. You're going to pay for the charcoal, and if you're inclined to use lighter fluid, that's going to cost something. The propane is going to cost something. I mean, all of that, it costs a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, and that's one of the first things I wanted to talk to you guys about with this whole balling on a budget idea, the smoke and the char. It is not difficult to infuse in your food. You're thinking, well, this grill is too expensive. I want a Traeger, but it's $700. I'm not prepared to spend that kind of money. You don't have to do that. As long as you've got a little bit of ingenuity and $20 in your pocket, you're basically ready to go. I'm thinking to myself, how do I want to get a grill or smoker, right? Craigslist is the first place I go. Well, I take that back. Maybe Facebook Marketplace is the first place I go. Craigslist, of course, offer up. There's tons of sites out there where you can find people trying to get rid of their grills because they didn't know how to use them or they bought them for a season. College students are another great way to go because they'll buy these things thinking that they're going to need them or want them, and then they never use them. And they're basically just giving them away because now they're moving away from college, right? So finding a Weber kettle or something that I tell people to do if they're looking for just a cheap charcoal grill and they don't know where to start, but they want something brand new, go over to your Walmart, buy one of those square ones. I know people are going to tell me that's terrible advice, but you know what? If you're going to get started on something, and if you can keep it out of the rain, it'll last you 2, 3, 4 seasons. You'll be able to do everything you want. And because of the different smoking methods that are out there for the Weber kettles, the big round ones, all of the same styles of cooking apply to those cheaper grills, quote unquote, cheaper grills. And then, of course, your smokers go the same way. And at the very end of the spectrum, you've got good old fashioned cinder block and a grill grate from Walmart that is literally $7, $8, $9. You can go in there, you can get a 21.5-inch Weber grate or the like. It's not going to be a Weber brand, but it's going to be something similar. You're going to be able to prop that up on some bricks or cinder blocks or something, and then you're going to be able to throw some charcoal underneath that. This is, of course, provided you've got a yard or something that you don't mind getting a little burn spot in. But I'm just saying, where there's a will, there's a way. I've seen grills built out of abandoned shopping carts. So if you want to do it, you can find a way to do it. And the reason why I'm talking about all this stuff is because one of the easiest ways to ball on a budget is to add that smoke and char to whatever you're making.
One of our secrets to making an amazing dish is adding char or smoke. So deviled eggs, pretty basic, classic at a picnic. But if you smoke the yolks first and then make your filling, it's an amazing component. Top it with 3 pieces of bacon crumbled over a dozen eggs. Boom, you're like $5 in with an incredible dish. You can also smoke the eggs as a whole for 5 minutes before putting them on a Cobb salad. So that's a really, really awesome way. If you want to do anything with corn, like in a chili or put it on tacos, if you grill the corn first, that charred flavor is amazing.
Yeah, 100%. As a matter of fact, one of the hot tips that we got from Chef Eric Chiappetta today, who, by the way, has his own show called Chef or Death, was smoking and or grilling a store-bought lasagna, one of the ones in the big pans. Run your smoker at 375 degrees and smoke that lasagna. And as soon as he said it to me, by the way, I just thought, yep, that is 100% the right way to go with those, because instantly I'm thinking about take and bake pizzas. Let's say you've got a Papa Murphy's or a Figaro's, or even there's a lot of grocery stores now, right, that are doing the take and bake pizzas. Yeah. Is Costco still doing take and bake pizzas? Or? Okay, yeah.
Costco, Kroger, Sam's Club.
Those little baking sheets, those...
tin?
Some of them are tin, some of them are paper. Those can withstand up to 600 degrees or something like that. So technically, you can throw something like that on a grill, add a little smoke and char. People are going to be eating this $6, $7 ready to bake to take home and bake pizza. And they're going to be going, this is incredible. What is this flavor that I'm tasting? And it's just that smoke and char. And by the way, Chef Eric said pairing with that lasagna, a good cheap Lambrusco, a red Lambrusco is the way to go.
A red Lambrusco is going to run you under $10 a bottle.
Even a nice one's going to be $14-15.
Yeah, super cheap. So if you take a $10 pizza, a $10 bottle of wine, it's $20. Divide by 4 people. Gourmet.
I'm not splitting my wine with 4 people. You crazy?
Ballin on a budget. Oh, and a note to those stoners out there, do not put the cardboard paper box on the grill. As soon as you said that, I was like, somebody is really going to get confused.
Well, not directly like over the fire, but if you've got a smoker, they work great. Even a gas grill. So we had one of those diffusing infrared gas grills. Do you remember that one?
I do remember that one.
That worked fantastic on pizzas. It really did.
We did a lot of pizzas on that grill.
We sure did.
If you've never had grilled pizza, your life is incomplete, and I'm judging you right now. No, I'm not.
It's one thing to put a smoked meat on a pizza. It's something entirely different to smoke the pizza.
Okay, so that segues into my other favorite simple dish you make, smoked meatloaf.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So you make your regular mama's meatloaf, but instead of cooking it in the oven, you cook it on the grill or cook it in the smoker. And you get this smoke ring along the top of the meatloaf. You can either do a free-form meatloaf on a small tin tray, or you can put it in your normal meatloaf pans. You can get the disposable ones at your local grocery store, or I've done our regular nonstick pan, or you can do your cast iron pan. All of that will totally work just fine. If you want to elevate it, you can add sun-dried tomatoes and chop those up and mix them into the meatloaf. So then you've got the sun-dried tomatoes soaking up all that good meat juju. And then you've got that smoky component. So you've got that acid and the smoke that really balances and rounds out your meatloaf. I love meatloaf. Not everybody does, but maybe they just never had it smoked.
Right.
So super cheap meal on a budget, Meatloaf Monday, but elevated to the next level. Serve that with mashed potatoes and maybe some grilled veggies. You're golden.
You'd mentioned sun-dried tomatoes,
right?
And it made me think about when you do your fire-roasted tomatoes and it adds that little smoky component. So I wanted to talk a little bit about pasta, because pasta is easily one of the cheapest and most filling ways to go when you're trying to feed a family. But it can get monotonous, you know? Just doing top ramen with ketchup on it is not going to fly.
Oh, good Lord. Tell me you've never eaten that.
No, I haven't.
Thank God.
But I've known people who've had parents that have done that. Yeah, I know. She's cringing her face, and I'm sure you are too at home.
I'm dying. I'm dying.
The thing that I love about Cory Ann's pasta, though, her spaghetti especially, is that she always finds a way to take it to the next level. Share some of your tips on.
Okay, so if you have a garden where you can grow tomatoes, I, like everybody else, ends up planting way too many tomatoes. So what I like to do, just take the whole tomato, cut it in half, char it in the oven. And that means you just put it on a baking sheet. You don't have to put anything on it. And you roast it at 400 degrees for 30 minutes to an hour. And you're going to get a char on the skin. It's going to start to blister and crisp. And the juices will start to reduce. So what does that do? It cuts down on the amount of liquid in your tomatoes. It infuses that charred flavor. And then you can run your tomatoes through your food processor or your food mill or anything that you normally do when you're canning tomatoes. And then use those charred tomatoes canned later. You can make your tomato sauce or tomato paste out of that. That's what we did last year. I like to add sun-dried tomatoes if I can. Of course, I did way too many tomatoes last year. So we have a dehydrator and we dried them and then chop those up and incorporate them into the sauce for a big punch of tomato flavor. And then with my sauces, I love to add tons of oregano, tons of basil. Now, fresh herbs are more expensive, so you can go with dried herbs. Anybody out there that has ever cooked with essential oils, I'd say start by adding 1 or 2 drops of oregano oil and basil oil and rosemary if you want to be creative and a little dangerous, but I can't stress enough, 1 or 2 drops. But that's a cheap way to add a whole bunch of flavor if you don't have a lot of fresh herbs in your kitchen. Of course, a seed packet's $1 and you can grow your own and then cut that. That's also super cheap. When it comes to your onions, a nice saute on those onions and olives and olive oil or butter, and that gets a great caramelized flavor. And that caramelized flavor on the onions adds another depth of flavor to your sauce.
As most veggies do when you roast them, things will get sweeter when you roast them and they start to break down and cook up. Garlic is that way. Onions are that way. And you can really bring different flavors to a dish by using different types of onions. It's not just about the white onions, the yellow onions, the red onions. And we're talking shallots. We're talking green onions. There's a lot of different things that you can do. And you really get to play around with your own personal recipes on a budget by using these different types of onion.
Now, the rule with herbs is that you add your fresh herbs last. So if you want to have a more expensive item in a spaghetti sauce and you want to splurge on fresh basil, put it in last. Put it in right before you serve it, because that's when those oils are going to be released from the leaves and really be fragrant and add a punch to your sauce. I love Italian sausage. I like it spicy, but if you don't, just go with your straight Italian sausage. If you want to kick that fennel flavor up, which I'm a fan of, you can toast some fennel seeds, which you can buy in bulk. And then a little bit goes a long way. A teaspoon of fennel seeds, you toast them up and then you crush them and sprinkle those in there. And you're going to get a big burst of that fennel that everybody associates with a great Italian sausage. That's delicious.
And then going back to the grill, of course, fire roasting the tomatoes, fire roasting the onions, or if you're making a meatball or sausage spaghetti, fire roasting, grilling, or smoking the meatballs or the sausage can really bring that smoke and char into it. But honey, what if someone is just trying to cook a quick meal? They've got all their ingredients, but they don't have any tomatoes. What can they do?
But if you don't have any tomatoes, it's not required for pasta. Pasta is just the foundation of the dish. But a really basic dish that Chef Casey Gonzalez was telling us about is just spaghetti aglio e olio. And I'm probably not saying that right. It's like Worcestershire sauce. But it's pasta, onion, garlic, olive oil, little crushed red pepper flakes, fresh parsley.
Of course, fresh parsley.
And just fresh grated Parmesan.
Well, that's super easy.
Super easy. You know, people think that your spaghetti has to be this big dish, but sometimes simple is better. Sometimes a dish that's got good ingredients, elegantly presented and well prepared has a bigger impact and is Ballin on a budget.
How sacrilegious would it be if you took a 15-cent egg and fried it and threw it on top of a plate of that?
Then we're going Asian.
You think that'd be an Asian flair to this
No,
this spaghetti dish?
That would take me down an Asian road, because you could do a rice noodle with a sesame oil instead of olive oil. Could still do garlic. You could do green onions instead of regular onions. Instead of fresh parsley, you could do a diced Asian cabbage and then top it with a fried egg, toasted sesame seeds, maybe some roasted seaweed to get that green in there instead of the parsley.
Well, and you know what? That is actually something that Chef Russell Sawyer was telling me about. He reminded me that the best place to go and stock up on your herbs and spices, especially if you're a family on a budget, is something like an Asian market or a supermercado, a Mexican market, and you're going to find all of the spices you possibly need in the highest quality for the lowest price in those areas. And not just that, but a much wider array of all the different spices.
Like if you want to cook with chilies, which gives a really great depth of flavor. Not all chilies are going to be hot that you find dried in the store. Some are going to be more earthy, roasty flavor with a tiny little bit of spice, and some are going to be a big punch of spice with lots of citrus. So, you can find a variety of dried chilies in Asian stores or Mexican stores, and they're really unique to those dishes, but they can give you a great variety of flavors.
That's true.
Buying ingredients dried and then rehydrating them is a great way to spread the love. Mushrooms, for example. Dried mushrooms are expensive, but you don't need a lot when you rehydrate them and then make a great mushroom broth or mushroom soup, because then it goes a long way. And you can buy bulk dried mushrooms at like Costco or Sam's Club online. And don't neglect your online shopping. I mean, sometimes you can buy 5 pounds of cumin on Amazon for a steal of a deal. Didn't we just have Amazon Prime Day?
Right. Very true.
So it's a really great time to check out those non-perishable items that you want to keep in your pantry so that you can take a basic dish and elevate it.
And as far as fresh ingredients go, now is the right time to be shopping at the farmer's market, right?
You can always elevate a dish by getting great local produce. If you know a farmer that has a lot of peas, you can always do pea shoots. You can eat the entire plant of peas, and the young pea shoots make a great new variety, a new flavor, a new texture in a salad. You can also take regular green peas or baby carrots or squash and make a puree out of them with some onions and some garlic and some olive oil, salt and pepper. And it's a cheap ingredient. You could even get it in the freezer section if it's not the prime time of the year. And puree that and put that down as a base with your dish. And boom, you've got color, you've got flavor, you've got texture, and you got vitamins.
And boy, you're going outside of the box too.
Yeah.
That's what really makes an interesting dish. Not everybody appreciates an interesting dish, but when, again, you're trying to ball on a budget, and if you're a foodie, as all of us are that are listening to the show, you are always looking for that thing that's going to take your dish to the next level. And it's not always that you're on a budget. It's that you're just looking for something different. And I spoke with Chef Roberto Rose from Vinalegro and the Byron Cafe in California, and he was talking to me about this portobello mushroom dish that he does. And right now, he's able to get portobello caps from his local farmer's market for $1 a piece. That's not going to be universal around the country, but it just goes to show that if you're willing to shop local and shop smart in the same way that you can find online deals for your non-perishables, things like these mushroom caps that may not be perfectly round, they may not be the most beautiful thing in the world, so they're not selling to the supermarkets, they're still delicious. They're still 100% ready to go. And so finding a deal like this makes you able to make these incredible dishes, like something that he serves at Vinalegro, actually. It's a roasted portobello caprese. I know. Beautiful. Roast the portobello cap with olive oil, salt, pepper, garlic, and parsley. Let it cool. Slices of mozzarella and tomatoes. Roast for another 10 minutes and then drizzle with a balsamic reduction. I'm telling you, man, these look incredible. We are going to have photos of this dish, by the way, on pardonmyfork.com, as well as the associated social media. But when he sent me these photos and his recipe, I just thought, wow, talk about taking some fairly simple ingredients. As a matter of fact, ingredients that a lot of us probably have laying around the house, aside from the portobello mushroom caps, and just taking it to the absolute next level. You
know, the portobello mushroom is a really great alternative to meat. And also one portobello mushroom has your entire daily dose of vitamin D if you live in an area like we do where vitamin D deficiency is a chronic problem. So that's a good thing to get and try to incorporate into your diet. You know, the staples to have in your pantry, your beans, your rice, your lentils, your pasta. It's a basic platform, a foundation for your dish. But how do you take that foundation and elevate it? Well, we've talked a lot about bone broth. So you buy a chicken whole, you buy a whole pork shoulder, you cut out what you want, you roast your whole meats, you char and roast your bones to get great flavor, and then you make a bone broth out of it. Okay, well, so now you've got 2 gallons of bone broth and you're thinking, okay, do I do a bone broth cleanse? What do I do? Well, you cook your beans and your rice and your lentils in the bone broth.
How often have I talked about it on this show? Cooking rice in duck bone broth.
Amazing. If you haven't done it yet and you're a fan of our show, please go out and do it. Get a duck and roast the bones and make the broth and just cook your rice in it. It's so good.
It is so incredible. And talk about, buying the duck, not exactly the cheapest thing in the world,
no,
but making the bone broth, boiling those bones for 8 hours and then reserving that broth later to cook literally pennies worth of rice in that's going to feed you for days. Talk about elevating your meal to the next level.
And also using the whole product. Don't
let that bird die in vain.
Don't let the bird die in vain. Suzanne Duplantis, Make Over My Leftover, she would turn over and smack your mama if she found out that you were wasting anything that could add flavor to a dish down the road. So you buy your chickens whole, you save your bones, you do something with the broth. It's really, 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 really easy. She also has given us a ton of tips about how to take leftovers from one meal and turn them into something else to elevate the next meal.
Mm-hmm.
I really want everybody to go back and look at her Thanksgiving leftover dishes. I always flash back to that when she makes those mashed potato sticks.
I know.
Who thought of that? But instead of wasting it, use it and turn it into something better to make your next dish fantastic.
And it always takes me back to the first time we interviewed her on the show. And with zero prep work, by the way, I just was all of a sudden like, Suzanne, I got one more question before we let you go. Here's 5 ingredients I have in my fridge. And it was literally Thanksgiving leftovers.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what would you do with those? And in real time, she came up with 3 recipes. It was so funny and so fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. Suzanne is our head chef that we've worked with last year at the World Food Championship. And we're going to work with again this year at World Food Championship in Dallas in October.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings up to mind food sport and how to be competitive on a budget. One thing that a lot of people might not know is that at a lot of competitions, you have to provide all of your ingredients. They might have a sponsored ingredient, a central focus that you need to make shine in your dish that needs to be
Not
present.
just incorporate, but make shine.
Yeah, you don't want it to just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be a prominent component in your dish.
And I always tell people, it drives me nuts when I'm watching Chopped or some other show and they have that basket of ingredients that they've never seen before. And one of the ingredients is toothpaste. And then inevitably the judge at some point is like, I don't taste enough of the toothpaste. You didn't make it the highlight of this dish.
I know, right? Well, so how do you elevate that star ingredient and not blow your budget? Because, these are common everyday home folks. They might be an accountant. They might be a banker. They might be a taxi driver. They might be a chiropractor. Who knows? And this is their hobby, their fun thing. They enjoy cooking. So what do you do to elevate a star ingredient without blowing your budget?
And I'll tell you, this stuff that we're talking about and learning how to elevate your budget meals when you're cooking on a budget, when you're cooking poor, basically, that is going to lend itself so much to when you're trying to do a live cooking competition.
A really cheap way to elevate any dish is citrus. You can have lemons, limes, and you can grate the rind and you get your lemon zest, your lime zest. That's a really great cheap way to add a punch of flavor. The juice of those lemons and limes is a great way to take anything to the next level.
It's funny, Chef Mark Conway, host of the Family Meal podcast, he said something very similar to me today because I was telling him about our theme for the day. And he said, you cannot leave out the juxtaposition of a spicy pepper and a fruit. And he talked a lot about, one of his favorite things to do is jalapenos and peaches cooked down for a sauce.
Oh, yeah, that's so good.
And he talked about things like when you're making a pico de gallo, you don't have to use tomatoes. He said he's substituted grapes, he's substituted oranges, he's substituted watermelon in his pico de gallo.
Wow.
And when you add the chili elements to that, it brings a sweet and spicy that can really bump a dish up. It can bump your tacos up. Instead of just a plain old taco, you've now got a funky, fresh, California easy breezy thing going on.
So that reminds me of my watermelon salad that I love to make. When watermelon's in season, it's really cheap. Again, buying in season is going to be buying cheap. So you take a watermelon, you cube it, you ball it, whatever. You ribbon some basil and ribbon some mint. And those are cheap, inexpensive, fresh herbs that give a big punch. Toss that in there with a little bit of salt. And the expensive ingredient is going to be a balsamic vinegar, a balsamic glaze. I prefer white balsamic vinegar in my watermelon salad, but that adds a great side dish to any meal.
I remember the first time we had that, we were eating it with, I think it was pork belly burnt ends being made by a local catering company.
Oh, mind blown.
That was to die for. It was so good.
It was so good. And that's just my new go-to summer salad. It's just delicious.
Because it's so light and crisp, but man, has it got a depth of flavor. And it complements the smoked meat so well.
Really well. If it's the middle of winter and you want to have a fruit punch in your dish, but you don't have fresh fruit, jams and jellies.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do all summer? Out here, we've had strawberry season, raspberry season. We're flat in the middle of blueberry season out here. So folks are freezing and canning all these fresh fruits to store it for the winter. Well, you take out a few tablespoons of jam and a jalapeno pepper and some cheap white wine, and you have a great spicy sauce to pour on some meatballs in December.
That is a fact.
And then you bring a little bit of summer, but it's cheap. How much is a jar of jam?
Mm-hmm.
And how much is one jalapeno? Because if you can't handle a lot of spice, one jalapeno and a jar of jam is plenty.
Mm-hmm.
And some wine, you cook it into a sauce. That'll go a long way. And none of that is an expensive ingredient, but it adds a layer of flavor to something that's a cheap meal.
And not only can that jam be a glaze or a sauce,
Mm-hmm.
it can also be a marinade.
Yes.
We had a number of different people coming at us and talking about the importance of marinating your inexpensive cuts of meat. Baker from Michigan, Laura Davis, Chef Andy Teixeira, and even Chef Casey Gonzalez were all talking about the importance of marinating your meat, especially when it's those cheaper cuts, which, by the way, if you're coming back around to going to your local butcher, when you go to your local butcher, they're going to be able to tell you, you can get these cuts out of this cheaper piece of meat. They can help you with it. They might even cut it for you. It's a great way to go. And then if you do have those cheaper cuts of meat, things like flank or eye round cut into steaks, marinating them, and then, of course, throwing them over the grill is a good way to go. If you're doing them in a pan, that's not a bad way to go either. Throw a little bit of your jam sauce in there, and it's really going to add that extra depth of flavor and elevate an otherwise very inexpensive cut of meat.
You know, that's a trick that we saw some chefs doing is they would do a vacuum sealed marinade on some of their meats at the World Food Championship. And that's something that, you know, power is provided at these competitions. So if you invest in that one relatively expensive item, like a food saver, but you can take it with you, then you're going to force infuse flavor into that meat. Now, I had a patient pay me in meat. Not that I'm putting that out there that I do that, but I do that. So if you have a bunch of antelope, just come on by. And so he was cleaning his freezer out before he went hunting for the season and brought me a cooler. And I was like, praise Jesus. This was so delicious. And what did we do? We vacuum infused it. Some we did with whiskey, some we did with red wine, and it was delicious. It's a cheap cut of antelope. Who knows how old that animal is or what they were feeding on. But when you infuse it, the acid that's in that marinade is going to help break down the really tough fibers in that cut of meat. And it's going to give you something that's just fork tender. I personally love eating venison and antelope and elk that's been marinated, and it's super delicious. If you get a piece of antelope and it seems to be pretty gamey, you can soak it in milk, and that way you won't waste it. And then pour that milk off and then marinate it and get your flavors in there, and that'll break the meat down really, really well. Also, buying turkey in bulk after Thanksgiving is another cheap way, or sometimes stores will have turkey breasts that you can buy, and they'll be much cheaper the day or two after the holidays. And you can take that large turkey breast, defrost it, you can grind it yourself, you can cut it into steaks, you can butterfly it out, stuff it and roll it and then refreeze it. Those are all a great cheap way to infuse more flavor into a cheap cut of meat.
Bo Gout on Facebook had that comment underneath of our post on Pardon My Fork. He said, purchasing your meat in bulk after a large holiday is the way to go. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And that is a great idea. And by the way, the relatively expensive piece of equipment that you're going to use very often, you just have to do like I do and get that piece for your spouse for Christmas.
Is that what happened?
Hey, you wanted those vacuum containers.
I did.
You wanted those vacuum marinade containers.
I'm the person that asks for vacuum marinade containers or leak-proof Tupperware or brand new spatulas for Christmas.
And I am there to oblige you, honey.
I'm such a nerd. Our kitchen is so full of gadgets and doodads. It's just, that's the way.
I do have an issue with kitchen gadgets. I'll give you that.
You do. You're cut off until Christmas.
Man.
I know, right? And we're always like checking out new rubs and sauces and spices and like, let's try this, let's try that. If you have the space, if you have any interest, the Square Foot Gardening is a really good website to check out if you want to try and get the maximum impact from a small square footage for your own garden. Growing it yourself is always cheap.
That's a great way to go.
It's always the cheapest way to go.
And if you don't have a garden space, there isn't anything stopping you from at least growing your own herbs and spices in your window.
Right.
Here, during the wintertime, we grow our own green onions in the windowsill. We just do it in mason jars.
Respread them. Having a connection with a local farmer. There's tons of farmers where you can meet them at a farm stand in the summer and connect with them later. Like, hey, what are you growing? What's available right now? I'm buying in season. We have a farmer. We'll call him Steve, and he lets me know, hey, my asparagus is coming up, and come by and get 20 pounds and 40 pounds. I think I pickled 40 pounds of asparagus this year. And taking pickled asparagus, wrapping it with prosciutto, boom.
Oh, a little cream cheese.
Little cream cheese, elevate.
That's a great way to go, yeah.
It's delicious. I love mixing anything pickled or marinated or brined into a dish. If you like salmon, taking canned salmon, capers, and cream cheese with just your regular dill, that's a really great way to add an elevated level because capers have a briny, salty, vinegary flavor that complements that oiliness and the heaviness of the cream cheese. And the dill brings that vegetal quality in. But all of these are cheap ingredients that can make a really nice appetizer.
I was about to say, the beauty of that is you can make that into a dip pretty easily if you mixed all of that together.
Maybe a little mayonnaise, you're good to go. I make zucchini relish every year, and I love to mix that into chicken salad. It's your mom's recipe, although I cut down on the sugar, but your mom's from Arkansas. So, and then, dill pickles. Who doesn't like dill pickles? Throwing dill pickles in adds volume, adds flavor, adds punch to a tuna salad. Super good. Heck, the Australians, they always put pickled beets on their burgers. But that adds flavor. You can buy in bulk. You can pickle it yourself. And it is not a lot of calories, doesn't add a lot of dollars. And it's a new little ingredient that makes your guests go, what is that?
Right.
And I think that's what takes a basic dish and makes it better.
And I've made lots of refrigerator pickles, by the way. You don't technically have to can pickles in order to make pickles.
No.
You can just do a hot brine over your veggies and then stick it in the back of the fridge for a week or two. It'll do the same thing. It's not, and pickling, even when you can pickles, it's not an instant thing. So there's a wait time either way. But if you don't feel comfortable with doing the canning, but you still want to be able to make your own pickles to bring that extra addition to your dishes, you can make them in the fridge. It's not a problem.
Nope. And if you have a vacuum sealer, you can do a quick pickle, which we've done before.
Which I love doing, pickles in 30 minutes. Heck yeah.
Pickled onions is a very inexpensive way to add a nice punch. And it's a super cheap vegetable to pickle yourself. I encourage everybody to go out there and try a basic pickle. It's not that scary. You've got vinegar and salt. That kills botulism. You're going to be fine.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point.
You don't need a pressure canner. And pickles, you don't. Anything pickled or brined is just going to infuse more flavor. Alton Brown absolutely swears by brining your turkey, which we also do.
Oh, yes.
You buy a basic butterball turkey, but we brine ours for 3 days in at least kosher salt, but I like to do an apple cider brine. And that takes your basic turkey to another level your dad has never turned down. Brined turkey. We also smoke it, and that's another layer of smoke and char.
This is also true. And you can smoke meat on just about any grill using it the right way. And we're going to be having a grilling guide coming out here pretty soon. I want to touch on just a couple more things. We had a tremendous outpouring from the community about this topic, which I greatly appreciate. There's no one that understands the importance of being able to cook great food on a budget like chefs. Yes. We all started somewhere. We're not all Gordon Ramsay. As a matter of fact, we haven't yet talked about mac and cheese, but we had several chefs tell us about mac and cheese. So I quickly want to touch on that. Of course, the easy way to make mac and cheese at home is to do the shell pasta, right? Or really any kind of pasta. I like the twists and I like the shells personally. So, of course, we know we can do homemade mac and cheese. I prefer like the shells or the spirals. And you make your roux, you add cheddar, or if you want to get a little weird with it, you can do pepper jack, and there's lots of different options as far as what you can add to it. But when it comes to boxed mac and cheese, I feel like that's what people really gravitate towards when they think mac and cheese. And hey, listen, it's a great staple. It's shelf stable. It's going to be around long after we're gone, by the way. There's going to be nothing left but cockroaches, Twinkies, and boxes of Kraft mac and cheese, right?
Oh my gosh. But mac and cheese is an easy pleaser for kids.
Very easy. And it can be a very easy pleaser for adults too, if you know how to kick it up a notch.
So I love tuna noodle casserole and I love tuna melts. Russell Sawyer suggested taking your regular boxed mac and cheese, maybe a white cheddar mac and cheese, and adding green peas, tuna, Cajun seasoning, and top it off with Parmesan cheese, and you've got tuna melt in a bowl.
That is ridiculous.
Cheap ingredients. Most people have them laying around the house. Amazing. I love spicy mac and cheese. So you get a canned pickled jalapenos. Super delish. Mix them in, maybe some Cajun like andouille sausage. You don't need a lot. Can go a long way. And, when you're talking about cheeses, instead of a basic cheddar, maybe you could go with a sharp cheddar, an aged cheddar.
Mix it with a Monterey.
Maybe sprinkle some smoked Gouda on top when you bake it. Just all those little ways add a nice flavor profile.
And then, of course, a little crumbled bacon and crispy onion straws on top. And you've basically got a meal that will please just about anybody.
The bottom line, if you want to elevate any dish, bacon.
This is true. This is a good point.
Ignore everything we've just said, bacon. Always bacon. That can elevate anything. I challenge anyone out there to name a dish that isn't made better by bacon.
Yeah, can't do it.
No, you can't.
Yeah, it's the duct tape of food.
It holds everything together, makes it better. Bacon.
All right, so we're coming down to the end of this, but I would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the inexpensive wines that you can pair with these Ballin' on a budget dishes, because let's be honest, you're not going to want to plop down with a Bud Light Lime or a Corona or whatever that low-calorie beer was that we had years ago. I'm talking, you want a good wine or spirit or drink pairing, right?
Well, vodka soda is always a really basic thing, and you can add some fresh fruit to that or a little bit of syrup, and that will take it and go a long way. Cabernet Sauvignon is going to be a reliable wine that you can get on a budget. Your red blends, your table blends, those are going to be blended for a particular flavor profile, so that's something that you can rely on and it'll be consistent. I would steer clear of a Pinot Noir or a Merlot. A low budget Pinot or Merlot is not going to be very reliable unless you know the winery and you've tried it before.
And there is one exception, because when I was talking to Chef Eric Chiappata earlier today, he was talking about how good deals you can find on little known wines, wines that are relatively unknown, and from regions that have not gotten popular yet. Wines from Argentina or even Australia. Elizabeth Smith, a wine expert from California, was telling us that some of her favorite sparkling wines are coming out of Barefoot right now.
Oh, yeah. Barefoot has a really nice sparkling rosé, which would go great with barbecue. Quick tip, sparkling wines go great with barbecue. It complements the smoke and char and that heaviness that you get off of a barbecue, sauces, etc., and really rounds out the palate. It's a nice palate cleanser to prepare you for the next bite.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And inevitably, when you're going with something that's cheap, sweeter is a good way to go. And that's why Roberto Rose was suggesting to us something like a boxed Moscato wine as the base of a sangria. You add a little inexpensive vodka, a little bit of pineapple juice and orange juice to a Moscato wine to die for. To die for.
You take a good basic ingredient, spread it out. If you do want to splurge a little bit more on wine, but you want it to go further, make a white wine spritzer. It's a great summer drink, but you can take a nice bottle of wine, and instead of it serving 4 glasses, you could spread it out to 8, and that cuts your cost down. You can just mix it with a little bit of spritzer and maybe some citrus, and you're good to go.
Also, I have to say, I think mimosas and bellinis are good pretty much any time of the day, especially when you're eating this kind of stuff. And when you start looking at, I don't want to say the name of it, but there's a very inexpensive sparkling wine that you can get. And Cory Ann's laughing because a friend of hers buys the stuff by the case because it just goes so well with so many different things. And so a very inexpensive bottle of sparkling wine. Forget about it. What's that brand called? It's going to bother me now.
Andre.
There you go.
It's your cheap college girl wine. It's the bottom shelf sparkling pink wine that college girlfriends drink. Shoot, my girlfriend from college, Christina, she and I used to drink that in college thinking we're
you're being fancy.
So fancy. But it's a great mimosa. It's a great girlfriend weekend wine.
When you're adding a sweet fruit juice to it.
It doesn't need to be fabulous.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. It gives you the bubbles. It's the fun and the fruity, and it's not going to blow a budget.
Exactly.
Now, if you have leftover sparkling wine, which I've never met that person, no, I don't need that negativity. But if you have leftover sparkling wine that's flat the next day, marinate your chicken in it or use it to cook a pasta dish. Don't let that wine go to waste.
That is a great point.
If you do get a wine, say you buy a Cabernet or say you buy a Merlot on a budget and it's crap, you can make a great sauce for your chicken, equal parts red wine to brown sugar, and then a teaspoon of paprika per cup. And that's a good finishing sauce if you want to use up that crappy wine.
That is a great tip. I love that.
It's really sweet because you're doing equal parts of wine and brown sugar, and you add the smoked paprika. So again, a little bit of smoke and char. If you want to make it spicy, throw in red pepper flakes. But you cook it down into a thick syrupy sauce and pour it on top of pork chops or chicken.
I love that, man. And let's not leave out the discount grocery store, by the way.
Right.
Just one last little thing to touch on. Almost every community has what you would consider a dent and ding store. We've got several of them around here that are locally owned, but I know you have them all across the nation. Don't ever think that you're too fancy to be shopping in those places, because I'll tell you what, a lot of our culinary inspiration can come from these places. We'll see products in there that simply have not sold well. They're not a bad product, but they were too expensive or they were too odd sounding. And we were able to pick them up at a deep discount and completely change the way we were cooking a particular dish because of this newfound ingredient. So don't sleep on those places. They are in every community. It might take a little bit of searching, but you will come up with one.
My new love affair with caraway seeds came from the discount grocery store run by the Mennonites in this community. There's a large Mennonite community here. And depending on where you're at, maybe they're Amish, Mennonite, whatever. But they had these giant frozen hams that had this caraway seed rub on the outside. And I'd never had ham with a caraway seed rub. Blew my mind. It was delicious.
Oh, it was so good.
I was so surprised. And we've tried to recreate that here at home with our own hams.
We have, and to mixed success, but you never know what you're going to find at those places.
And sometimes that's fun.
Yeah.
Try something new.
It's why you go to the farmer's market a lot of times. So you don't know what you're going to find. And so you can do that in grocery stores as well as the farmer's market, discount places, anywhere you go. I think that's just about it for us. I've had a ton of fun talking about this stuff with you. Cory Ann is, she's the queen of food bank fancy. She just knows how to take very basic ingredients and make them incredible. So I'm really glad that we could sit down and do that with you guys and with you, hon.
Well, look, we had struggles growing up, went to the food bank. We were really poor, and I have 20 recipes to use with the canned garbanzo beans that you get from the food bank. I mean, seriously, if the food bank is where you're going to shop, you have to be able to make it enjoyable because, you're in a tough time. And we were there, and, you pull yourself up and you move on, but you never lose those skills of taking something mundane, something basic, something that was donated, and try to do something special with it.
That is a fact. And by the way, a lot of people think that if you need to eat gluten-free or nut-free or even dairy-free, that it's going to be flavor-free. And I want to remind you that that is not the case. Our fine sponsors over at Gem City Fine Foods have proved that time and time again. If you do have a food allergy that you're needing to watch out for, dairy, gluten, soy, nuts, it doesn't matter. They have got a product for you coming out of their gluten-free and nut-free certified bakery using all clean ingredients, only cage-free eggs, only RBGH dairy free, the cleanest, the best flavors, the best products, and you're only going to find them at Gem City Fine Foods. You can get them on Amazon or at gemcityfinefoods.com. That triple berry cheesecake, by the way, is very much in season. I recommend that you go and check that out. I want to thank them for sponsoring this episode. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. I want to thank you for telling a friend. If you enjoyed listening to this whole lineup of incredible information brought to you by the food community, throw us a like, throw us a share, let someone in your life know that it's easy to ball on a budget. And before we go, I want to thank you, Cory Ann. I could not have done this episode without you, so thank you so much.
I had a lot of fun doing this. When we were talking about this, I just blew ideas out the door.
Oh, yeah, you were ready to go. As a matter of fact, the cooking community as a whole was ready to go, so I want to thank everyone that did participate in it with us. So, for Cory Ann and all of our foodie contributors today, this is Andy, and we will see you next time.